Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're all very welcome. I've been asked to do many things in my life, but this is a first for me to act as MC, so I'll do the best I can. And how appropriate it is to do it for a photographic exhibition. Some time ago, Tom came to me and he says to me that he was having an exhibition here in the town hall, and I act as MC, and I said, I certainly will, and thanks very much, Tom, for asking me. I had a tour of the exhibition yesterday with Tom, and I was very impressed with the photographs. First of all, his lighting, the composition, and his attention to detail. In a few minutes, Mr. Simon Ward will officially open the exhibition, but before this, I will call on the man himself, Tom Flynn, to address you. Thank you.
When I was putting this exhibition together, I was thinking of the intimate connection between Westport here in County Mayo, Westport, Connecticut, and the Irish connection across the water in England at Kingston. And I was reminded earlier tonight that basically I did grow up on the banks of the Carabeg River, starting in Altamount Street, graduating over to Father Nines's Park, and of course, as you all know, Harkins Hill now. But in a way, what you see here on the wall this evening, it's only a minute selection of what I've taken over the last number of years. If I start very briefly down at the far end of the hall here, the Doors Brothers Bridge on James Street, I actually like to think about that as Freedom Bridge. And the reason I think about it as Freedom Bridge is that the connection of Ireland's struggle for nationhood and their connection with the Doors Brothers and many other men and women from around the area. Westport House, of course, the front of the building itself, originally Westport Corner Mark, was located, and then at some time, I think it was around the 1700s, it was demolished and the new Westport commenced on the far side. And then moving on, I suppose, if I just come to the Westport, Connecticut end of things, the two pictures just midway down the hall here, and the one up here just behind Francis, they're all part of the hunting grounds of the Pequot Indians. They once had a nation of around 10,000 people, and they were a fierce tribe in their own way, but with the coming of the Dutch in around 1624, 1625 thereabouts, they linked up with the Dutch and they helped to carry out raiding parties across what is now the state of Connecticut and further afield. With the white man, of course, coming into a virgin territory such as the new continent, the diseases that the white man brought with him, they demolished the Pequot nation down to somewhere in the region of around 4,000 Indians. The interesting thing since then is that the Indian tribes and their nation in the United States is being savagely attacked on a daily basis, even to this day. But this time, it's not people coming in from overseas to conquer the new land. Instead, it's big companies taking the land of the Indians, putting oil pipes through, and basically polluting the area. So, them three pictures that I mentioned there, now the two down there and this one here, are very important in keeping our connection with the American Red Indian. Now, the other thing too, of course, is that Westport, Connecticut is a great place for Irish people, and there are actually quite a few Westport people living in and around Westport and further up the road in Fairfield and so on. So that's one of the reasons why I've been attracted to this particular area. The picture behind Des Kelly, for example, in the distance, if you look very carefully, you'll see Long Island. And Long Island, it's important to me because of the Irish connection in developing that strip of land, as indeed developing the Empire State Building, which is just beside it. So the Irish, and indeed for that matter, the Westport connection is very, very strong. in a way like this, what you see here tonight for me has been a personal journey, it's a family journey. Our family is scattered on both sides of the pond, as it were. So it was a family connection that brought me to Westport, Connecticut. But a long time ago, my grandfather on my father's side, he was born in New York of Irish parents, and they died young, and he was brought back here to Kilmena, where he was reared by cousins. And he got married here, and in the fullness of time, brought a family into the world. But because of the poverty of the time, he was forced to immigrate. So he went back to the States, and unfortunately, the Wall Street crash of 1929 occurred, and the rest is history. So his remains are buried in Columbus, Ohio. Down here on the left-hand side, I have two pictures of Kingston on Thames. One is a reflection in the Thames of Hampton Court Palace, great place for King Henry VIII and Oliver Cromwell. When he was running riot in Ireland, he had an occasion to report into the head chief, King Henry himself, and the news that Oliver received from King Henry was somewhat terminal. Of course, Sir Thomas More got bad news there as well. On the other side then of the Thames River, the Kingston Bridge spanning the Thames there, fantastic restaurant, and that's well, I think it's a lovely reflection in the Thames. So I took them two pictures in particular, I think it was around November of last year. With the exception of the last two pictures, which I just referred to now, midway down the hall there, all of these pictures were taken from the hand. And the only time I used a tripod was for the two pictures down below celebrating the fireworks display outburst there was taken using the tripod at night down at Westport Harbour. And the one with the wing walkers, that was taken from the hill overlooking Westport Harbour. So all these pictures in their own right, they're not just photographs, because when you think about it, each picture is a storybook, some with multiple stories, and they all have one thing in common. They are all loaded with history, your history and mine, and history of people that we've never met. So when you're looking at the pictures, don't look at them as photographs, but look at them as a learning tool to learn about your own background, perhaps your own DNA, your own genetics, whatever. I suppose I'll just finish off by saying that I was very privileged last November, I think it was, or December, Simon, to exhibit with Westport artists. The difference between the paint artists and photographers like myself is that we have to make decisions in a nanosecond, whereas the artist can take his or her image away with them, either in their head or on the camera, and then they can sit down to the easel and paint away to their heart's content and modify whichever way they want the image. But we have to take into consideration the weather conditions, the wind, the rain, what the humidity is like. It's a whole load of things associated with taking photography and trying to get the perfect picture. It's a lifelong quest for any photographer, and there are some pretty good photographers here in our midst here tonight. So, lastly, I just want to, first of all, I want to thank Simon for coming along tonight to launch the exhibition. Of course, I want to thank Frank as well, because like myself, Frank and I share one thing in common now, and it's not just all the years that we worked together down in Westport Textiles, which seems like a long time ago, but for him, being in sea is his first time. For me, this is my first time to exhibit as a solo artist. And finally, I would like to express my appreciation. I received a phone call last night from the Southern Hemisphere, from a public representative who cannot be here with us tonight. I would also like to acknowledge the, I got some calls from France this evening, and there were some from the United States and some from England. So even though we're a small community here on the West Coast, at the same time, we have a global reach. So with that, I commend this exhibition to you, and I hand it over to Simon here now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom, for taking us through that interesting journey.
Thanks very much.
Now, I've been associated with Simon for the years, with Ivy Town and Tom, and they've put the country together, so he needs no introduction. So to officially open the exhibition, I call him Simon.
Great. Thank you very much, Frank. And Tom, that was a wonderful speech. You are the master of Toastmasters. All those years have certainly paid off. Yourself and Ali, how many years have you been involved in
Well,
Toastmasters?
Ali is 17, 18, and I'm whatever, 5.
Well, it certainly shows.
Good pupil.
So,
Good pupil.
Absolutely.
so that was wonderful. But I'd like to start by saying good evening. And I'd like to welcome you to Tom Flynn's first solo photographic exhibition here in the Town Hall Theatre. And as it's his first exhibition, we're going to have an initial round of applause for him. Good evening. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Tom was a true Cody, being born in Altamont Street. And I first met Tom over a decade ago within my position in Westport Town Council. Tom, I've discovered, is a very wonderful and a very sincere person. From my initially meeting Tom many years ago, it quickly became apparent that he's a man who feels emotion very deeply and is very affected by and is very conscious of his environment and those who surround him and are part of his life. And that environment that affects him is very prominent in these photographs this evening. This exhibition, titled A Moment in Time, is in essence a journey for Tom, and it brings us to where his own life has taken him, and that of his good wife Joan, and his children Magella, Andrew, Niamh and Siobhan. The photographs are from 3 separate locations and are connected by family. And we've started the stone-cut bridges, which Tom is very fond of, from our own Carabeg River here in Westport, to the deep waters of the Sagatuck River, home of the First Nations Pequot tribe that you speak about so passionately in Westport in Connecticut. And then back again to the other side of the pond, to the riverbanks of Kingston upon Thames in London. The medium of photography, in essence, is an act of looking, and the camera's way of directing other people's attention to share the things that are personally interesting to the photographer. So we see through Tom's lens. What's interesting is there are no portraits within the exhibition. The subject matter is place, and these places reflect Tom's links to his roots and his family. Looking at the photographs with Tom during the week of Westport, Connecticut, it reminds him very vividly of a happy time spent there with his son Andrew and his family. Whether walking the Atlantic beaches or the deciduous Connecticut woodlands that are beautifully reflected in the ponds and the photographs on the right-hand side beside the door, these images unlock precious memories for Tom. Closer to home on the banks of the Thames, his photograph of Hampton Court Palace reminds him of his daughter Siobhan and his visits to her, and their closeness on their evening walks along the riverbank, illuminated by the reflected light of the palace's facade, projecting onto the still water of the Thames, just up on the left-hand side. Many of the photographs within the exhibition are focused on human settlement along rivers, which in themselves symbolise journeys like Tom's life, which has brought him back to the very source of his own journey, here to the town of Westport, where it all started, where he grew up as he set himself along the banks of the Carabeg River. Tom's photographs are evocative of his love of the town. One image that catches the eye, I think it's down there on the right-hand side, is the snow-laden Croagh Patrick, with the town nestled in the foreground, and the image is jointly punctuated by the Reek Croagh Patrick snowclad in the distance, and in the foreground you have the spire of Holy Trinity Church. And really that photograph symbolises the island's journey from Neolithic man to the Druids and seamlessly on to Christianity. So each one of the photographs has a deep meaning for Tom. In another image, one of my favourite ones, we see a bright western sunset over that great drowned glaciated landscape of Clew Bay. I think it's also down on the right-hand side, where the rising sea submerged the drumlins that gently drop below sea level to create a tapestry of islands and peninsulas we're so familiar with. In the words of that great Belfast naturalist Robert Lloyd Prager, those whale-backed oblong ridges of rift, forming an archipelago of grassy inlets. In this image, Tom encapsulates that eternal summer's day's end with a golden sunset so evocative of Clew Bay, with the low evening's raking light, long shadows from the silhouetted islands such as Dornish and also the Scotsman's Bonnet, which features so prominently. Finally, I'd like to note that 2 moments captured by Tom of last year's 250 celebrations. The first is an image on St. Patrick's weekend last of a solitary firework bursting over the dark night skies of Westport Harbour, initiating the town's 250th celebrations. And the second moment at last year's air show of 2 Breitling stunt biplanes semi-silhouetted against a moody, turbulent grey sky that only an Irish air show could procure because the weather's not very good. But they're both truly wonderful moments caught in time by Tom. And while we're at such lofty altitudes of air shows, not only would I like to declare Tom's exhibition open, but also for you to show your appreciation for Tom, because he has come here tonight to share his talents with you. So I'd like to give Tom a round of applause. Just to finish off, because Tom is such a good speaker, he's going to go on even further, and he's going to bring on a very short journey and pick out maybe 2 or 3 images that he'll stand in front of and just explain what those images mean to him. So without further ado, I declare Tom's first solo exhibition officially open, and also for Tom to carry you around the room and look at 1 or 2 of those evocative images. So Tom, if you'd like to lead the way.
Just before that, there's 1 or 2 little things I'd like to do, okay? Now, leave. And
Yeah.
now, okay, I'd like you to meet Frank, okay? Okay, now, would you like to hand that to Frank? Good girl. Yeah. Mammy's going to help you there? Okay.
Tom, this is your graphic.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah. This is Millie, and that's Norman, and that's Neve, of course. Okay. Well done, Frank. Thank you very much. The work is greatly appreciated. Simon, this is Ruby, my eldest grandchild here.
A gem.
And
Gosh.
no, Ruby, there you are.
Ruby, thank you very much. This is beautiful. There's one of those eternal evening summers in Clew Bay that you just can't maybe it starts with this one. Maybe. That's big, Tom. Thank you very much.
Quite welcome. Listen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay. That's all right. Okay. Kids, do you want to come in here with Frank? Come on in and bring Daddy in as well. Okay. Okay. Daddy, come in. That's it. Now we've got Daddy in the picture also. Great stuff. Come on then. Now, so we can all smile for Mom and Ollie and everybody else. Okay?
Can I just get the 3 of you just, so kids, you hop out and just.
All right.
Okay. Maybe we can turn around and get the crowd in the background.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. If you'd like to group in a little bit.
Yeah. Joy.
You stand in the middle, Tom.
Yeah. Okay.
We can do that. Let the crowd.
Do you want us to kneel down? Uh-huh.
Yay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Great stuff.
Okay, cool.
Okay, that's it.